The stars above Rahlos Prime glittered with deceptive tranquility, their light cold and indifferent to the war waged below. In the jagged highlands on the planet's northern ridge, among craters half swallowed by jungle overgrowth, a man lay prone on a narrow ledge. Callen Ward didn't move. He hadn't for nearly 6 hours. Not since the last patrol passed by. Not since he'd last counted breaths between heartbeats. He exhaled slowly through his nose, eyes fixed on the ruin-strewn valley beneath. Through the scope of his rifle, he watched them, their polished armor reflecting slivers of starlight, movements clean, rehearsed, merciless. The Ran infantry, Council issued, genetically enhanced for endurance and reflexes. More machine than flesh. They advanced without sound, scanning the ruins for signs of life, signs of him. His gloved hand adjusted the scope's dial slightly, recalibrating for wind drift. His shoulder ached where a plasma bolt had grazed him 2 days ago. He hadn't had time to seal the wound properly. Mira had done her best, but with her resources limited to what could be scavenged or hacked, her abilities were stretched thin. "You should not be awake," Mira's voice whispered in his earpiece, smooth, low, almost human. "I never went to sleep," Callen murmured back, lips barely moving. He saw the patrol pause at a collapsed transport carrier, the hull torn open like a ribcage. One soldier pointed, another crouched. They were speaking, but too far for the suit to catch audio. Still, Callen didn't need to hear them. He'd been in that position before. This was the part where they got curious. And curiosity, he knew, often preceded death. Mira's voice returned cautious. "You should move. A second squad is approaching from the east. Reinforced armor signature. Estimated interception in 17 minutes, Callen finished. "I know." He didn't blink. Through the scope, one Naran turned, its helmet sweeping toward the ledge. Callen remained still. Breath in. Hold. Wait. Then without sound, he squeezed the trigger. The shot rang like thunder across the valley. The Theron's helmet snapped back. Then its body dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Before the others could react, a second bolt punched through the squad leader's chest. Chaos bloomed, shouting in their clipped, harsh dialect. Bolts of plasma lit up the night as they fired wildly into the rocks. Callen had already moved. He rolled from the ledge, boots landing hard on the shale. Pain lanced up his leg, but he gritted his teeth and sprinted, weaving through natural formations. His cloak shimmered, adapting to the background in bursts, but it wouldn't hold long. They'd track him by heat or sound or the trail of blood he was inevitably leaving behind. "You're outnumbered," Mira stated. "I'm always outnumbered," Callen said, ducking behind a ridge. His hands flew over the rifle, collapsing it into its compact form and strapping it to his back. "You need to disappear. Now. I'm working on it." He dove into a crevice, sliding through moss and mud into the broken service duct of an old mining route. It stank of rust and decay, but it was defensible. And, more importantly, it was familiar. He crawled until the light from outside faded. Then, resting against the wall, he let out a shuddering breath. The pain was catching up. His shoulder burned, his thigh throbbed, and exhaustion curled around his mind like smoke. For a moment, silence. Then Mira again, quieter now, pulse stabilizing. "They've lost you." Thermal scans show no pursuit within a 100-meter radius. Callen closed his eyes. Just for a second. How long until they regroup? Assuming standard Council recon protocol? 15 minutes before they scan this area with microdrones. He forced his eyes open. No rest. Not yet. It had been 3 weeks since the Council's assault on Rahlos Prime. 3 weeks since the planetary defense network fell, orbital command was wiped from the sky, and the human settlements were marked for cleansing. He had been stationed at the sniper's ridge above Fort Darrow when the first orbital lance came down. It reduced the entire forward base to slag in seconds. Callen survived by accident. A comms malfunction had delayed his redeployment. A lucky failure. The rest of his unit wasn't so fortunate. Since then, he had moved like a phantom across the continent, disrupting Council advances, destroying relay towers, sabotaging supply lines. He avoided direct contact unless it was surgically necessary. One shot, one body, no witness. It was a cruel game of attrition, and he played it not out of glory, but out of duty. There were civilians hiding in the old mines, scattered in pods deep underground. Miners, farmers, teachers, the last threads of a dying human presence. He was their last protector. The Council thought them irrelevant. Background noise. But Callen knew better. Resistance didn't start with armies. It started with survivors. His earpiece chimed, a sharp-coded pulse. Mira's tone changed instantly. "We've intercepted a Council transmission." "Go," he said. Directive from the Galactic Council Security Directorate. Rahlos Prime deemed unclean. Final suppression order approved. All remaining organic resistance to be neutralized. Tactical sterilization to commence within 48 hours. Callen's stomach turned. They're going to glass the surface? Yes. Orbital strikes targeting known settlement zones and industrial relics. He leaned his head back against the wall, breathing heavily. "Then we're out of time. There's a signal relay 2 kilometers southeast," Mira said. "Still partially functional. If reactivated, it could bounce a message to the outer net. There may be Terran remnants who hear it." "Then that's our new target," Callen said, already crawling out of the duct. "We sent a message. We'll let them know someone's still fighting." "It won't be enough," Mira warned. "And they will come harder, with more than scouts. I'm counting on it." As he emerged from the shaft into moonlight, Callen looked out over the shattered landscape of Rahlos Prime. What once had been fields and skyports was now blackened earth and burning husks. Yet somewhere, beneath all that death, there was still a heartbeat. His. And as long as it beat, they hadn't won. The jungle of Rahlos Prime pulsed with life again, though not in the natural way. The birds had long stopped singing, and the insects gave the ruins a wide berth. Somewhere in the tangled canopy, a drone buzzed and died mid-flight, its power core fried by an EMP trap laced into the trees like an invisible spider's web. Callen Ward crouched in the roots of an ancient tree, half submerged in a swampy depression, cloaked in camo mesh still damp from the morning rain. Through the scope of his now partially repaired S-96, he tracked the shimmering outlines of the Rand strike team. 6 of them. No rookies this time. These were hunters, Council elite, genetically modified for jungle combat, with thermal-dampened armor and bone-blade melee rigs. Mira's voice hummed softly in his ear, less fragmented than before. Tactical analysis complete. Route predictable. Deploying option 12 is advised. Callen flicked his eyes left, triggering a HUD overlay. Trap route confirmed. He had less than 4 seconds before the lead Duran stepped on the pressure plate. He exhaled slowly. Not yet. The alien's boot touched the moss-covered stone. Callen pressed the trigger. The explosion wasn't large. It didn't need to be. The concussive mine flipped the lead hunter backward into his squad. In that moment of chaos, Callen fired 3 more shots, each one a lesson in finality. The last hunter ran. Callen led him. "Let them carry the fear back," he muttered. "You've allowed 23 survivors over the last 10 days, Mira noted. "This is a pattern. It's a message." He dismantled the nest, moving with practiced speed. The jungle swallowed him whole as he retreated through a series of false trails. He didn't need to outrun them. He needed them to chase him, to bleed resources, to report back to the council that the planet wasn't quiet, that the human wasn't dead. The legend of the sniper was beginning to grow, though he never intended to become myth. Still, whispers had begun among the more impressionable council ranks. A ghost in the ruins. A predator who moved like vapor and struck like thunder. Some said he was a weapon humanity had buried deep on Rahlos Prime, a final contingency. Others claimed he had died long ago, and it was his rage alone that walked the forest now. Callen didn't care about legends. He cared that the council was starting to react. The longer they sent elite squads to silence him, the more time other scattered human cells had to regroup. The war might be over, but rebellion didn't need armies. It needed hope. In the hours after the ambush, Callen returned to his fallback hide, a buried bunker beneath the temple ruins. It was a tangle of salvaged tech, broken equipment, and makeshift tools. He laid out his gear for inspection. 3 mags remaining, 2 EMP mines, 1 thermal charge. His rifle scope had finally been replaced using parts from a wrecked drone. Still no long-range comms. Energy reserves at 22%, Mira said, projected now from a flickering holopad. You need to consider power scavenging or hibernation. Not yet. She hesitated. You are pushing the limits of biological resilience. 3 broken ribs. Nerve damage. If you lose consciousness again. I said not yet. She didn't argue further. She learned. Later, as the sky bruised purple and night fell, Callen climbed the temple tower with his rifle slung over his shoulder. The stars glinted overhead, cold, distant things. Somewhere up there, the council's orbital platforms watched the planet like gods behind tinted glass. He sat in silence, staring at the horizon until a blip in his HUD caught his eye. Movement. Airborne. Small, fast. Not a drone. He focused his scope. A shuttle. Unmarked, descending erratically. Damaged. Smoke trailing behind it like a comet. It clipped the treetops before crashing somewhere northwest, near a flooded canyon. Mira, he said quietly, show me the fastest route. Within 20 minutes, he was gone. By the time Callen reached the crash site, the fires had mostly died. Twisted metal steamed in the humid air. He moved carefully, rifle aimed, expecting a trap. But what he found was worse than a council squad. Civilians. A dozen of them. Scattered, wounded. Most were alien, Zyrians, Murati, a few species he didn't even recognize. All bore the brands of the council's slavery protocol. Shock collars. Subdermal tracking. One of them was human. Callen froze. The man looked up from where he was tending a wounded Murati girl. His eyes widened as he recognized the sniper armor, the rifle. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Callen lowered his weapon. I thought we were all gone, the man whispered. Not yet. The human's name was Corvin. He'd been a technician aboard a council supply freighter that had gone rogue after a failed slave revolt. They'd fled here trying to hide. The council would already be on their way to clean it up. We're not fighters, Corvin said. We were just trying to disappear. No one disappears from the council, Callen replied. He worked quickly, helping them rig camouflage and shelter. Mira interfaced with the rec systems, managing to disable most of the tracking beacons. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy time. That night, Callen sat beside the fireless gathering. A Zyrian female approached him, her iridescent skin darkened by bruises. Her voice was careful, the syllables thick with accent. You are the one who strikes from shadow, the one they fear. I'm no savior. No, but you are real, and that is enough. He didn't sleep. Instead, he watched the stars shift and fade until dawn lit the jungle in gold and green. The council patrol arrived at midday. Fast, efficient, 11 soldiers led by a full commander. Callen was already waiting. This time he didn't run. He fought. With Mira feeding him tactical overlays and the refugees evacuating behind him, Callen led the enemy through a gauntlet of explosive traps, misdirection, and sniper fire. One by one, the Therans fell, but not without cost. He was shot twice, one near his shoulder, another, a graze along his leg that slowed him to a crawl. But in the end, only one council soldier limped away, screaming for evac into a cracked comm unit. Callen returned to the wreck site, half limping, half dragging himself forward. The refugees were gone, already heading deeper into the forest with coordinates and instructions memorized. Corvin lingered. They'll keep coming for you. They already are. Then what now? Callen stared at the sky, where the council's ships drifted like vultures behind clouds. We make noise, he said, big enough they can't ignore, and loud enough for others to hear. He watched Corvin leave, then turned back toward the ruins. The galaxy thought humanity was extinct, but Callen Ward was still breathing, and now the council knew it too. The air above Rahlos Prime shimmered as two council corvettes broke through the atmosphere, their hulls streaked with atmospheric friction and bristling with kinetic cannons. From Callen Ward's position high in the canopy, he watched their descent with clinical calm. His hand rested lightly on the S-96, its barrel cleaned, optics polished, and power cell freshly charged. His wounds had scabbed over, nerves still singing from adrenaline and hastily applied nanomed patches. Rest was for after the war, if there ever was an after. Below him, the jungle floor remained deceptively serene. The world's thick underbrush, pungent humidity, and loamy soil made perfect cover for movement and death. Rahlos Prime had become his hunting ground, and now it was bait. Mira's voice crackled in his ear, her tone tight with calculation. New landing trajectory confirmed. Estimated impact in Sector Echo 7. 2 platoons. Full recon and strike. Council Protocol 71. Urban suppression. They're not here to scout, Callen muttered. They're here to erase. He shifted on the branch, staring through the scope toward a long-abandoned council outpost, now overtaken by the jungle. The enemy had chosen it as a forward operations base, likely unaware of the data core still buried beneath its lower levels. More importantly, they didn't know about the cave systems nearby, the same ones he'd helped the refugees disappear into. The outpost couldn't fall, not just because of the civilians or the cache of stolen intelligence below, but because it was the only place left on Rahlos that still carried a whisper of resistance. Callen tapped his helmet, switching channels. Mira, activate Operation Gorgon. A moment passed. You are authorizing Protocol Override Gamma Black. Execute. Far beneath the surface, decades-old mining charges, salvaged and rewired, woke from their slumber. They wouldn't detonate, not yet. But if triggered, they could collapse half the region's tunnels. A last resort. For now, Callen moved. He slipped through the trees like a shadow, never seen, never heard. His presence was more felt than known. Faint pressure on the air, the stillness that made predators nervous. He wasn't aiming to kill today. Not first. Today, he would provoke. By dusk, the council patrol had made camp. The base flickered with automated defenses and shield nodes, a hive of activity wrapped in a cocoon of arrogance. The aliens had not seen real resistance in months. Most believed humanity extinct. Their guard had lowered, even among the elite. Callen corrected that mistake. He targeted their comm relay first, one precision shot from half a kilometer away. The antenna disintegrated with a high-pitched pop, followed by confusion and shouting in the Rand dialects. A second shot fried their surveillance drone just as it ascended, showering sparks across a watchtower. Before they could mount a search, He'd already circled wide, planting decoy noise generators and pulsing false biosignatures through scavenged transmitters. They chased ghosts until dawn. The next day, Callen returned to the outer perimeter. He didn't fire a shot. He just left marks, deliberate, human, and fresh. Boot prints where none should be. The shredded remains of a ration pack marked Terran forces. A splatter of blood, his own, carefully drawn into an archaic Earth symbol. Fear, he knew, was a slower poison than plasma. But it lasted longer. That night, Mira's voice sounded again, quieter this time. Intercepted transmission. Council forces report, whispers. They believe the sniper is part of a larger Terran remnant. There's talk of ghosts. Callen allowed himself the ghost of a smile. Good. They're starting to see shadows. Resources are dwindling. You've expended 97% of all recoverable munitions. Medical reserves, critical. Noted. She paused. You can't do this forever. No, he agreed. But long enough. Another day passed. The council tightened their perimeter. Their frustration grew. Soldiers barked louder. Patrols doubled. The jungle grew hostile not from nature, but from tension. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Then they brought in the commander. Callen watched from the ruins of a toppled ziggurat, eyes fixed on the new arrival. The Duran officer was massive even by their standards, adorned in ceremonial red armor trimmed with obsidian inlays. His mask bore the shape of a predator bird, part symbol, part battlefield HUD. This wasn't a squad leader. This was execution incarnate. Mira confirmed it. Commander Carell of the Council's Vindicator Corps, responsible for suppression campaigns on 6 liberated worlds, known for orbital sterilization protocols. They brought a butcher, Callen said. Yes. He studied Carell's movements. Precision. Discipline. The commander didn't bark orders. He gave them like stone being carved. His troops moved tighter, faster. Fear began to fade, replaced by mechanical precision. Callen knew his time was narrowing. That night, he ventured back toward the outpost. A daring risk. The commander had deployed sensor nets and bioscanners. Advanced tech, difficult to fool. But Callen had one last move to make. He crawled beneath the enemy's nose, climbing through collapsed drain systems and half-flooded irrigation tunnels until he reached the data core vault under the outpost. He activated a buried relay using Mira's decryption routines. A soft hum, then a flicker. The signal burst out across the old Terran relay system, a beacon in the dark. A message encoded in obsolete frequencies, intelligible only to human tech. He spoke it plainly, letting the helmet filter his voice. This is Ghost Lance. Coordinates embedded. Council forces entrenched. Data cache intact. Resistance persists. You are not alone. The signal repeated twice, then shut off. It was suicide to stay longer. Callen made it out through a side passage just before a patrol swept through. He didn't have time to breathe. They were closing in. Mira crackled in his ear, voice strained. They've triangulated us. 10 units inbound. Commander Carell is leading the strike. Time. 3 minutes. He reached the fallback nest and readied the last 2 explosive charges. No more hiding. No more bleeding into the trees. The council needed to see him. When Carell stepped into the clearing, Callen rose from behind the altar stone, rifle aimed, but not firing. Around him, the forest seemed to hold its breath. I'm Callen Ward, he called. Ghost Lance. You came here to silence the last voice of Earth. I want you to know you failed. Carell said nothing. He simply raised a hand. The soldiers fanned out. Callen fired first. 3 went down before they could blink. He moved with practiced fury, like a storm honed by silence. Return fire lit the ruins, carving holes in ancient stone. But he didn't retreat. He led them through fire and memory, drawing them toward the mouth of the mine. When Karel stepped onto the trigger stone, Callen was already gone. The mines collapsed with a roar that split the jungle. The outpost fell silent. For hours, nothing stirred. But far beyond the planet, somewhere in the void, the signal had reached old satellites, bouncing through systems thought long dead. On a derelict cruiser, drifting in a forgotten nebula, a light blinked green. Humanity heard, and they were listening. Smoke curled upward in lazy tendrils from the collapsed mouth of the mine. The jungle remained quiet, stilled in the aftershock of destruction. For a moment, it seemed the world itself was uncertain, unsure whether to mourn or to breathe easier. Deep beneath the rubble, in a narrow shaft he'd carved into the side of a pre-existing cave, Callen Ward exhaled slowly. Blood ran in a thin stream from his brow, tracing the curve of his cheek and soaking into the collar of his armor. His left arm hung limp, shattered at the elbow. Breathing hurt more than it should, but he was alive. Mira flickered in the dark, her projection stuttering from the force of the blast. Vital signs are declining. Oxygen level within safe range for only 19 hours. Recommend immediate surface exit. Tunnel integrity? Callen croaked, voice raw. Unstable, but navigable. Seismic readings suggest a 3-meter crawl space northeast will bypass the main collapse. He nodded. It was all he could manage. It took him 6 hours to move those 3 meters, dragging his ruined body through narrow stone corridors that scraped skin from metal and bone alike. He thought he might black out once, maybe twice, but forced himself onward, driven not by hope, but necessity. There was no one else. No backup, no med-evac, no cavalry cresting a hill with banners raised. He was the last soldier still moving. When he emerged through a rent in the jungle floor, the sun had already set. The world glowed in twilight and silence, painted in shades of orange and indigo. He collapsed against a rock, gasping, vision tunneling. And then he heard it. A hum. Low. Subtle. The kind that vibrated more in the chest than the ears. He lifted his head, squinting toward the tree line. A ship. Small, agile, its hull patched with different alloys, its silhouette jagged and predatory. It hovered above the jungle like a wary bird of prey, scanning, circling. Callen tapped his helmet weakly. Mira, but she was already processing. Signal matched. Human transponder. Identified as Midnight Run, a former smuggler's ship known to operate beyond Council patrol zones. Currently flagged under Independent Resistance Movement Free Orbit 12. Callen gritted his teeth and triggered the beacon sewn into his forearm. A moment later, the ship tilted midair, adjusting course. Its lights swept across the clearing once, then twice, before settling directly on him. A hatch hissed open. 2 figures dropped from the underside, armor light but tactical. One knelt beside him immediately. Terran, the soldier asked. Callen forced a grim smile. In the bleeding flesh. They hoisted him aboard without ceremony, as the ship turned hard and ascended through the canopy. Callen's body seized once, twice, then surrendered to unconsciousness. He awoke to antiseptic light and unfamiliar voices. The medbay smelled of ozone and painkillers. His arm was in a splint, wrapped in a regenerative mesh. The worst wounds had been sealed. Across the bay, a woman stood watching him with crossed arms and military posture. Ward, she said, and he knew her voice. Didn't think you'd be the one to call us. Callen blinked, throat dry. Colonel Rios? She nodded. Hair shave on one side, scars crisscrossing her cheek like lightning. She'd been presumed dead after the siege of Europa Station. Clearly, reports had been exaggerated. Your signal reached 5 outposts, she said. "We're not as dead as they hoped." He chuckled, then winced. "I figured someone might be listening." She stepped closer, eyeing him. "What you pulled on Rahlos Prime. You turned a graveyard into a beacon. There's a lot of chatter now. Pockets of resistance are surfacing. The council is getting nervous." "Good. You're not done, are you?" Callen didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the reinforced window at the far end of the med bay. Outside, stars blinked like eyes in the void. Somewhere out there, the council still operated without restraint, still assumed humanity was scattered and broken. But the illusion had cracked. "I sent a message," he finally said. "But we need more than signals. We need strikes." She nodded once, then rest. "Because we got something coming. You're not the only ghost out there anymore." The days passed quickly aboard the midnight run. Callen recovered slowly, regaining strength with each new cycle. His bones knitted with the help of Regan gels and nanites. His mind, though, remained sharper than ever. Mira, fully integrated with the ship's systems, upgraded herself rapidly, drawing from black market code and old Terran encryption banks. Together, they pieced together intercepted council chatter. The destruction of the Rahlos outpost had thrown regional operations into disarray. Commanders were being recalled, resources rerouted, and more importantly, other human outposts, forgotten or hidden, were responding. Callen watched as locations populated across the star map. Beacon flares, distress calls, then organized resistance movements. It was happening. On the 7th day, Rios brought him to the strategy deck. A digital map hovered above them, marked in reds and blues, the balance finally beginning to shift. "We're hitting the Council's data relay on Orsis 4 next," she said. "If we take it out, their intel network in this sector goes dark. You know the terrain better than anyone. You're leading the op." Callen nodded. He no longer looked like the ruined sniper in the jungle. The scars remained, but beneath them, purpose had returned. "I'll need a team," he said. "You'll have one." He stepped closer to the map. "And after Orsis," she smiled grimly, "we go farther, deeper, until every world they think they own remembers who we are." Callen stared at the blinking red of the Council's next installation. They had made one mistake. They had left a wounded sniper alive. But worse than that, they had reminded him of what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. No banners would be raised. No cities liberated with fireworks and cheers. The new war wouldn't be won with armies, but with tenacity, shadow, and fire. Callen reached for his rifle, freshly cleaned and resting by the table. His hand curled around it like it had never left. He was ready. The darkness wasn't the end of the human story. It was only the prologue.